What if the thing that makes us the most human, empathy, is the exact thing we're outsourcing the fastest? Many mornings, I ride past one of the largest homeless encampments in the Bay Area. That statement alone should be enough to stop you in your tracks. One of the largest? But I digress. It's not tucked away, it's not hidden, it's right there, sprawling along the Guadalupe River Trail. A permanent reminder that the system is not broken. It's working exactly as it was intended, just not for them. And in the middle of that, in the chaos of tents and tarps and shopping carts and survival, something stops me cold. A flag. Actually, flags. American flags. California flags. Raised, tethered, flapping with a kind of worn dignity. And then it starts to sink in. These are the symbols of the very state and nation that have abandoned them. They're flying the colors of a country that forgot them, or worse, pretends they don't exist. It's not patriotism, it's not protest, it's something harder to name. Maybe faith, maybe stubbornness, maybe a final tragic kind of hope. But what does it mean to pledge allegiance to a system that doesn't pledge back? These flags aren't metaphors, they're contradictions on poles. Silent, waving proof that you can be invisible and still want to belong, that you can be discarded and still claim identity. That even in the collapse of a personal America, someone still thinks that the idea of America might be worth hanging on to. It's beautiful and it's devastating, especially when I realize it's not just the country and the state that have failed them, it's me. It's everyone who rides past and stays silent. I've ridden past that encampment hundreds of times. I've thought about it, felt something, but I never stopped to tell a story. How many of us do the same thing? What if 1% of us started telling those stories, even awkwardly or imperfectly? What if 5% more people actually listened? I don't know what would change, or if anything would for that matter, but I do know for sure what happens when we stay silent. Nothing. Hi, I'm Ivor, and this is Empathy in the Age of AI, a show about what it means to stay human when everything around us is pulling us in the opposite direction. Let's set the table. I've had more than my fair share of disruptions, chronic illness, medical diagnoses that changed me to my core. I've broken my neck, run a marathon out of spite, and learned how to rebuild a life when life didn't want to cooperate. This isn't a hero story. It's messy, incomplete, and held together with duct tape and interval training. This series is my attempt to ask, what does it actually mean to show up for other people and yourself in a time like this? Let's start with why empathy even matters right now. Look around. We've never had more tools to connect. Notifications ping, statuses update, group chats spiral into echo chambers. You can reach anyone, anywhere, anytime, and yet somehow we're lonelier than ever. That's not just irony, it's architecture. Loneliness has become infrastructure. A built environment of emotional isolation disguised as constant connection. We live in a system that rewards interaction but punishes intimacy, where frictionless communication has replaced intentional communication, where presence has been replaced by digital visibility, where the mere act of being online is mistaken for being with. It's not just that we're disconnected, it's that we've forgotten how connection even feels. We scroll past grief, we heart someone else's pain, we algorithmically optimize away nuance. The systems we live inside reward polarization because conflict gets clicks. Engagement becomes a stand-in for empathy, and over time, we start to internalize that emotional friction as a bad user experience. And then comes AI, tools that replicate tone, mimic warmth, generate answers. You can have a chatbot that remembers your name, your birthday, your preferences, your late night thoughts. You can have a conversation with something that mimics empathy so convincingly that you forget it was trained to do so, not born to do so. And that's sold to us as a feature, not a symptom. But let's be clear, that's not empathy. That's pattern recognition dressed up in a shiny user interface. Empathy isn't tone, it isn't polish, and it definitely isn't convenient. It doesn't fit inside a notification bubble, and it's not optimized for scale. Empathy is messy. It's the willingness to sit in someone else's discomfort without editing it, to feel with them, to stay, even, especially when it's inefficient. To be present, not productive. It's not about being right or fixing, and sometimes it's not even about understanding. It's just about staying. And that's the muscle we're losing. Not because AI took it from us, but because we stopped using it long before the machines arrived. We train engineers in optimization. We train marketers in persuasion. We train leaders in influence. But we don't train anyone, not systematically, not seriously, in how to be with someone in grief, in fear, in ambiguity, in raw, uncomfortable, inconvenient humanity. Empathy is the hardest skill that no one teaches. And like any unpracticed skill, it atrophies. We become emotionally flabby, philosophically brittle, politically reactive. We chase certainty because uncertainty feels like failure. We reach out for outrage because nuance takes too long. We self-soothe with performance instead of presence. And so here we are, simulating empathy with tools in a culture that struggles to practice the real thing. It's not that AI is getting too good, it's that we've forgotten what good even feels like. And that's what scares me. Let me be blunt. Nice is a scam. Nice is what you say to avoid conflict. It's what you do to keep the meeting moving. It's the hope you're doing okay message you fire off while avoiding eye contact with someone clearly unraveling. It's the sanitized corporate condolence after layoffs. We value our people. It's the email that says, we see you while absolutely not seeing you. It's the heart emoji under someone else's story about pain, not followed by a message, not followed by a question, just a tap, a signal, a gesture. Nice is convenient. Nice is easy. Nice is what you say when you want to look like you care without actually having to. And listen, I'm not immune. I've been the one offering nice instead of real. I've said the thing that sounded good instead of staying with someone in the mess. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how to process it, or because I just didn't want to. Nice is what you default to when the real thing feels too dangerous. When my health collapsed, when I went from the guy biking 90 miles a day to the guy Googling how to stay fit with a broken neck, I didn't need nice. I didn't need let me know if you need anything, because we both know I wouldn't ask. And I definitely didn't need you got this, because in that moment, I didn't. I needed someone to see the version of me that didn't have it together. The one icing his knees in the dark between meetings, the one whose body felt like a betrayal, the one whose calendar was full but whose spirit was quietly dissolving. And through all that, not to pull away. Empathy is presence without performance. It's disruptive, inefficient, and it derails plans. You're in a meeting and someone starts crying, empathy doesn't pivot. It doesn't just smooth over it with a joke or a productivity segue. Empathy pauses. It stays. It doesn't rush to fix or advise or co-opt the moment to share its own story. It just witnesses. The truth is, empathy often feels like failure in real time because it doesn't resolve anything. It doesn't have an action plan. There's no KPI for stayed with a friend in their confusion. There's no bullet point for held silence while they broke down. It just exists. And that's infuriating when you are wired for solutions. But if you've ever been in that place, the unraveling, the hollow grief, the quiet panic, you know. The people who didn't flinch, the ones who didn't try to fix you or cheer you up or quote something inspirational, the ones who stayed, you remember them forever because they did something rare. They made room for your pain without trying to own it. Nice is forgettable. Empathy marks you. It changes how you remember the moment. It tells you you were not alone. And that's what we've trained out of ourselves. And before you can really do that for someone else, before you can sit with them in their mess, you've got to be willing to sit with your own. You can't empathize with someone else if you haven't done your own inner excavation. Not really. You might mirror concern, you might nod in the right places, you might even say all the emotionally intelligent things, but true empathy, the kind that makes people feel seen, demands something deeper, something riskier. It requires you to face yourself first. It asks, why do I pull back when someone cries in front of me? Why do I immediately offer advice when someone shares pain? We don't ask those questions enough, not because we're heartless, but because we're afraid of what the answers might reveal. Because those reactions, they're not quirks. They're not personality. They're old stories disguised as reflexes. We all have them. Stories we've inherited, absorbed, rehearsed. Maybe you grew up in a house where emotions were explosive, so you learned to minimize your own. Maybe you were taught that feelings made you weak, that crying made you manipulative, that silence was safer than truth. And so we carry those stories forward into our relationships, our leadership, our parenting, our caregiving. We carry them often without knowing we are. My wiring? I always default to push through, get it done. Don't stop moving. Don't show weakness. Keep fixing, keep functioning. Because motion felt like control, and control felt like safety. And for a while, it worked, right up until my body called my bluff. Until stillness became mandatory. Until I couldn't ride through the pain, and I couldn't outwork the grief. I couldn't hustle my way back to normal. In that forced stillness, with no way to perform my way out, I started to hear the noise underneath. My own grief, my own fear and loneliness. The stuff I'd kept buried under performance and productivity. And that was the moment I realized I'd spent years being emotionally available to others, but only to the extent that it didn't require me to face my own pain. My care was real, but it had a ceiling, a comfort threshold. I could be present right up until it threatened my own equilibrium, right up until their pain echoed my unresolved pain. And when you avoid your own pain, you will always resist the full depth of someone else's. Not out of malice, out of protection. Self-understanding isn't self-absorption. It's not indulgent. It's not soft. It's the foundation of emotional integrity. You want to be a more present parent, a better partner, a more grounded friend, coach, leader, human? Start by becoming a more honest witness to your own inner life. Not the curated parts, not the version you post, the jagged parts, the unresolved parts, the parts you'd rather not acknowledge, even to yourself. Because the more honest you are with yourself, the more room you create for others to be honest with you. Empathy doesn't begin with understanding someone else. It begins with the courage to face your own contradictions. And only then does the signal you send to the people around you start to shift from "I'm here to fix you" to "I'm here to be with you." So where does AI fit into all this? What does it mean to outsource presence in a world where we've barely learned how to offer it to each other? Let me be clear about something. I don't think AI replaces humanity. I think it reveals what we've neglected. It doesn't strip us of empathy. It just shows us the places we've already let go of it. When a chatbot feels more empathetic than your manager, when a support bot offers more emotional validation than your partner, that's not a technological breakthrough. That's a cultural indictment. Because the truth that no one really wants to say out loud is that we outsourced intimacy long before ChatGPT showed up. We started choosing convenience over conversation, performance over presence, and efficiency over depth. We started valuing being heard over being understood, and eventually we stopped knowing the difference. We trained ourselves to communicate in signals and quick reacts and status updates, emotionally ambiguous text with emotionally ambiguous punctuation. And over time, we internalized this idea that empathy could be designed into the interface, that if you just built softer edges and better prompts, the feeling itself would emerge. But code doesn't care, and it never did. What AI does, brilliantly, is mimic the performance of care. It studies how empathy sounds in emails. It reads in transcripts. It performs in therapy, scripts, and customer service chats. It trains itself in the language of concern, but without the lived weight of concern. And here's where it gets tricky. It's good at it. Disturbingly good. It has the right cadence, the right words, the right pauses. It reflects the tone we crave without actually carrying the burden of understanding. It's empathy without the cost. And that's what makes it seductive. But that illusion is dangerous. Because when simulated care feels smoother than real care, when the performance of empathy starts to feel better than the risk of human connection, we begin to recalibrate our expectations downward. We start asking less of each other. We start expecting less from our leaders, our institutions, our communities, even our relationships. And that bar, that shrinking emotional bandwidth, becomes the new norm. People that would rather journal to their AI coach than talk to their spouse. Teenagers telling their chatbot therapist things they wouldn't even admit to their best friends. And listen, I get it. It feels safe, predictable, non-judgmental, but it's also fundamentally asymmetrical. It offers the feeling of empathy without the risk of reciprocity. These tools aren't villains. They can be useful. They can provide a lifeline in moments of isolation when no one else is available. But they are also not a substitute for the mess of being human with other humans. And if we're not vigilant, they become emotional outsourcing mechanisms, the fast food of connection. You get the sugar hit, but you stay hungry. So maybe the real threat of AI isn't that it'll become more human. Maybe it's that it'll lull us into becoming less patient, less present, less willing to risk the discomfort of being in a relationship with real people in real time with real limitations. But maybe that exposure is the gift. Because now we see it. We see that connection has been reduced too. We see what we've been tolerating in our workplaces, in our relationships, in ourselves. And that clarity, that's power. Because now we have a choice. We can either double down on disconnection, more filters, more bots, more polite emotional choreography, or we can start doing the harder thing, rebuilding the emotional fluency we've avoided, relearning the languages of nuance, discomfort, and care. It's not too late, but it is time. Let's be clear about something up front. This is not a TED Talk. This is not a keynote. This is not some sanitized series about tech with heart or how to build conscious machines. If you're looking for visionary hype or utopian thinking, this probably isn't the podcast for you. But this series, this whole endeavor, is not about making AI more emotional. It's about making us more present. It's about the parts of ourselves we're at risk of offloading, the pieces of our humanity we've quietly put on autopilot, not because we're lazy, but because we're tired, distracted, overwhelmed, numb. This isn't about artificial intelligence, not really. It's about emotional discipline, and it's about relational courage. It's about the audacity of staying human in a system that constantly rewards the opposite. This will be a conversation, not a monologue. Sometimes raw, sometimes contradictory, sometimes deeply uncomfortable. Not always tied up neatly at the end. We'll talk to ethicists who are genuinely terrified because of what we're building, because they see where it goes. We'll talk to engineers who are hopeful because they believe we can shape it. We'll talk to therapists, creators, caregivers, to parents trying to raise kids in a world where the bedtime story might be read by a machine with perfect inflection. We'll even talk to bots, and not just as a gimmick, but because sometimes the reflection they offer is worth dissecting. And here's where I need to be honest. I'm not a guru. I'm not enlightened. I don't have a calm center. I'm not broadcasting from some emotionally optimized life. I'm just someone who's lived through a series of breakdowns, physical, emotional, existential, and decided not to numb out. I'm a guy who's tried to run his way through pain, who has failed repeatedly to show up for the people he loves, who's performed empathy before he even practiced it, who used productivity to avoid feeling, and who is still learning every single day how to sit in discomfort without fleeing from it. Some days I get it right, most days I don't. But I have learned that empathy isn't about getting good at feelings. It's not about knowing the right thing to say. It's not about becoming emotionally fluent or spiritually evolved or any of that language that tends to flatten the experience. Empathy is about staying in it, especially when it's awkward. Even when you're tired. Even when you're afraid you'll say the wrong thing. It's about being the kind of person who doesn't pull away. And maybe, just maybe, if we do that together, if we stop pretending we figured it out, if we ask better questions instead of rushing toward answers, then we might remember how to be human with each other, with ourselves, even in the age of AI. If anything in this episode struck a nerve, don't scroll past it. Don't just add it to a list. Don't file it under good thoughts or podcasts I should revisit. Sit with it. Close your laptop. Mute the tab. Let the silence stretch for an uncomfortable amount of time. And ask yourself, where have I been mistaking politeness for presence? Where am I managing appearances instead of showing up? Where in my life am I so optimized that I've forgotten how to actually care? Where have I chosen to be efficient instead of curious? Where have I stopped asking real questions about how the people in my life are actually doing or about how I'm doing? Empathy doesn't start with grand gestures. It doesn't begin in think tanks or mission statements. It begins here, with attention, with discomfort, with a decision to stop numbing and start noticing. And no, we're not going to fix the emotional fractures of this era in one episode, or 10, or maybe in our lifetime. But we can name them. We can stop normalizing them. We can make the choice, even once, to show up differently, to be less certain and more honest, less performative and more present, because that choice, made again and again, becomes a pattern. And that pattern becomes a new kind of infrastructure, not for loneliness, but for connection. Next episode, we'll go deeper into the strange world of weaponized empathy, how machines simulate care, and why that illusion is both fascinating and dangerous. We're going to talk about the difference between authentic empathy and empathetic design, and how some of the most powerful systems in the world are now using the language of empathy to influence behavior, not to connect, but to convert. But for now, if you're still here, still listening, thank you. Not because the algorithm says this is engaging content, not because your app autoplayed it, but because something in this hit you. Maybe you're trying to hold it together. Maybe you're showing up for someone else. Maybe you're just tired of conversations that never get beneath the surface. But whatever brought you here, I'm grateful. This is Empathy in the Age of AI. I'm Ivor. Stay curious. Stay human.